Today we're going to be talking about why Netflix getting rid of password sharing is actually going to be a positive for the company. If you're not familiar with what password sharing is, it refers to the situation where I take my password and then I share it with a friend, and that friend shares it with their friend, and so on and so forth. They want to eliminate it so they can create more revenue for the company. And in order to understand that, we have to do a little bit of a deep dive into Netflix stock, and we're using Qualtrim Insights to do this. A software created by Joseph Carlson. Look up on YouTube if you're not familiar with them. You can actually see here that Netflix is actually trading down significantly year to date, down 51%. If you take a look at their 2-year, we can see they were actually trading about $700 a share in 2021. So that's a significant trade down. They have a lot of pressure from shareholders to create more positive free cash flow, but also create more value for them in general. If we take a look here, Netflix is actually one of the only profitable streaming companies. Even though their free cash flow is very willy wonky because of the amount of content they create, Netflix plans to implement measures like password sharing to hopefully become a more profitable company and more attractive to shareholders, and hopefully become more deserving of this valuation. As you see here, Netflix is trading at a 26 price to earnings. It's a pretty high price to earnings, especially in this environment where the recession is looming. Let's take a look at Netflix's content library to understand why Netflix deserves this valuation. Netflix is constantly creating a diverse amount of content for their viewers to watch, whereas Disney is basically just Star Wars and Marvel, and that can get old real quick. I say this as someone who loves Marvels and Star Wars. It's something I don't necessarily know if I'm going to subscribe to a platform just for these two IPs. Whereas if I sign up for Netflix, which is $20 a month, I get shows like Outer Banks, I get Arcane, an awesome anime show, Black Mirror, which is an awesome dystopian show, and then I get to see things like Squid Game, which was a long shot. This is something that Netflix didn't think was going to pan out for them. They only spent $21 million on Squid Game as a long shot. Netflix is able to do this because they're the biggest streaming company in the world, and it ended up paying off massively for them. Some of these HBO shows and Disney shows are spending $5 to $10 million on each episode, and this was $21 million. This has ended up being one of the biggest shows of all time. Got Stranger Things. Enough said. I don't have to say anything about Stranger Things. And got The Last Dance. They have a very strong content library. They got Narcos. They explore the stories of drug lords. They just got such a diverse IP compared to other streaming services, and I think this is part of their value proposition. And by getting rid of password sharing, you're gonna see, if you go here, let's go back to the Qualtrim Insights. You're actually gonna see about $1 billion to $1.5 billion of additional revenue growth. And I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot, right? If you actually look at their revenue growth in 2021, but it helps them fit more into their valuation and create more value for the shareholder. And I believe over time that since Netflix is spending so much money, upfront money for their shows, they're going to be able to create these shows cheaper in the future, just based off economies of scale, right? You got set designs that they're going to be able to copy and paste on future projects. You got contracts that are for multi-films or multiple TV shows that allow them to limit its cost. Also, you got costumes. There's a lot of different factors that play into how Netflix can create free cash flow for itself. And by getting rid of password sharing, we should see this hit the bottom line. This is going to create additional profits for Netflix. I believe that we're going to see a lot more people subscribe than the cancellations that a lot of society thinks we are going to face. However, a lot of people come to me and they're like, well, Ethan, what happens if I can't share with my family? I'm not going to want Netflix. I don't believe Netflix is going to be doing this. And we'll take a look at the methodology on how Netflix is able to target this without disrupting usability. Although the problem is complicated, we have the following observations. First, non-family members unauthorized sharing are unlikely to share devices with account holders since they live in physically different places. They might use devices that were owned by the account holder previously through sale/gift, but the devices are transferred and not shared, so the account owner is unlikely to use them again. Second, non-family users typically access the service from different locations rather than the home of the account holders. Otherwise, they are more like a part of a household and virtually impossible to identify. Based on these principles, we propose to jointly utilize geolocation and device information to estimate a sharing score for each account. Algorithm 3 describes how the sharing score is estimated. It depends on user profiles that are obtained from algorithm 1 and algorithm 2. Algorithm 1 scans through log data, extracts user information, and constructs efficient retrievable user profiles. Note the GPS coordinates in the session logs are usually noisy, so usage in one location, example of a home, can have different coordinates, although ideally it should only be one. Algorithm 2 merges neighboring locations. Without this procedure, multiple geolocations might be associated with an account, even if the owner only streams in her/home. Firstly, Netflix has been studying into this for several years, well before the public became aware and there was negative sentiment surrounding this, right? They are only going to implement this if they think this is going to create profitability for them as a company and users of the platform, right? They don't want to do something that's against their users' best interest, right? It's Netflix is essentially based off the concept of consumerism, right? So by doing this, they're able to create more efficient consumerism. And I don't think it's going to impact people that are going to work, because over time, and I bet you they're collecting this data right now, they're creating a sharing score in the background. I think it's interesting that they potentially could allow for a sharing score, right? So if there's deviation from that mean, then they'll be cracking down. But for example, let's talk about my Netflix account, right? We got a few users right here. We got my dad, we got my sister, we got the home, which is like kind of like our family account, and we got my mom, right? And these are all basically taking place in different locations, right? We got my dad who lives alone, the house, which me and my mom live together, and my sister who goes to school. And yeah, sometimes we're watching Netflix on the go, so it's going to consider that in our sharing score. But if I go and share with Bobby, who lives in Somalia, that's going to be deviation, and we're going to see some crackdown with that. And obviously, it's not going to be like, oh, you shared it once with your friend in Somalia, we're going to crack down on this. It's probably going to be by a warning system, right? But by doing this, it forces users that are kind of freeloading, and it's going to create more value. And I think we're going to see better content because of it. If you disagree with me, probably do. I'm taking a very strong stance on this, but I hope you understand why this is actually a good thing.